So next thing I want to talk about is freshness. Now, usually when I'm doing this in the roasting room, we play a little guessing game. So we have this little matrix that looks like this. And what we do is we try and fill it out and guess how long things stay fresh for. So you can see on the columns you've got beans, and you've got ground, and you've also got packed into a one-way valve bag, and then you've got completely open. So what I'd like you to do is go through those 4 different states, try and guess how long you think coffee is fresh for. So if you want to do that on a bit of paper, screenshot this now, or there'll be a link in the description below, and you can kind of download that from there. So if you're going to go and download it, pause the video, do that now, and come back. Hey, welcome back. Okay, so you've done your little answers, so put them to one side, and we'll crack on. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the misconceptions that people have with freshness, because there's a lot of things that people kind of hear around, and they kind of get passed on from person to person, and there's a lot of confusion around. And I see that every time we do a training session, because we have lots of different answers for those 4 boxes. So I've had everything in my sessions from instantly to forever in each one of those boxes, which is obviously quite a big range. I don't think we'd get quite a big range if we were talking about milk and how long that was fresh for. I think we'd be a little tighter. So some people think it just lasts forever and will survive nuclear holocaust, and the other people think that it just, as soon as it comes out of the roaster, it's starting to entirely age, and it needs to be used straight away as soon as it comes out of the roaster. Both of those things are wrong, by the way, but we have a big range. So a couple of the misconceptions and why people have it. When we go into a supermarket, we tend to see quite varied kind of dates on the back of coffee, and coffee is one of those funny things where it doesn't have a use by date, it has a best before. So you can drink really, really old coffee, and it won't actually cause you any physical problems with your stomach, and you won't be ill. It will just taste horrendous. So that's why we have a best before, but not a use by. Okay, so in terms of the best before, that's sort of determined by the quality level of the person producing the coffee, really. So it's when does that pass their threshold of what they consider to be best, or what they want to sell it at. So that can change wildly between different manufacturers. So that could be really long for some massive supermarket big blend. That could be as long as 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, something like that. And then you could buy something from your local roaster, and it could have a 3-month sort of best before on it. And what you could have a situation is you could have those 2 coffees sitting right next to each other on a shelf, and there's no way for you to know how long that's been on the shelf for. So you can't look at the best before and you can't say that's been there for a month because there's 2 months left, or it's been there for 17 months or whatever. You can't do that. The only way you can really do that is if you do things like people put roast dates on, so they can then see when it was roasted. What tends to happen confusingly with sort of trade accounts is when you put a roast date on, people ring you up the next day and say, why have you sent me coffee that's just got over its best before date? Because they look at the best before, and they look at the roasted on date, and they read best before, because it's a number on the back of a packet that they have to pay attention to. They never actually read the thing on top of it. So you end up constantly getting people ringing up and up and up and up. So at Pumphreys we put something different. We sort of break the mold a little bit, and we put week numbers on there so that people can quickly look and see the week number that's there. So they'll use the youngest week, last, as it were, so last in, last out. But for things like the coffee of the month, we'll put a roast date on, because we're just doing that once, and that's it. And that's when it's been roasted, and people can look at it from that. But commercially, it's slightly different. So that's maybe one of the reasons why people don't put them on more commercial type of blends. A couple of things that happen with coffee that are a little bit odd. So coffee is already brown. So the normal signs that we have of something maybe going off are that it would turn brown. So we don't really see that. If coffee was kind of white or light or flesh coloured, then we would see that change, and we would all drink fresh coffee all the time. But that doesn't happen. So fresh coffee looks exactly the same to the untrained eye as really, really old coffee. So it's really hard for us to see. Also, if people have never ever drunk fresh coffee, they will not know that they've not had fresh coffee. If people have said that's fresh coffee, they will have just associated that taste that they've had in that cup with that's what fresh coffee tastes like. And until they actually taste fresh coffee, they don't realise it even exists. So that's a bit of an issue as well. There are two kind of main processes happening when coffee starts to age. We have our oxidation, which is the apple going kind of brown on the side after it's been left out for 20 minutes to 2 hours. It starts to go brown. People kind of understand that it's rust as well, oxidizing things. It's oxygen just basically making a mess of the chemical structure of things. But yeah, and then the second thing we kind of need to pay attention to is a loss of carbon dioxide. So that's kind of a little bit like a flavor transporter for us as well. So we kind of we have flavor being transported to the palate when we have carbon dioxide. The way people sort of understand this is when we talk about kind of the flat bottle of Coke that's been sitting in the back of the car for 16 weeks and the last time you went to the beach. It's going to be longer now, isn't it? But yeah, so that really tastes dull and flat. So when you have stuff with no carbon dioxide in, it tastes dull and flat. So you can take that Coke and you can put it through a soda stream, because they're back. Yeah, with a vengeance from the 90s. So you can put it through a soda stream, recarbonate it, and it will taste just as it did before, or pretty darn close. So we need just that carbon dioxide. It's like the bus that the flavour gets on for us. There is another part of the freshness when you can have too much kind of carbon dioxide around, and that does odd things to, especially the espresso extraction. It does really odd things with that. But you just, when you taste something and it's too fresh and there's too much carbon dioxide going, and you get this sort of roasty flavour and this kind of overcarbonated drink kind of thing going on, which doesn't make it taste very nice. So normally you would want to rest coffee a little bit before you start to drink it. It seems to be more important with espresso. You get odd sorts of acids being produced with excess carbon dioxide as well. So that's not tremendously good. So the oxidation basically attacks the flavour, and then the loss of carbon dioxide stops our ability to get it. So when things go stale, they just taste woody and not very nice. And pretty much all coffee will end up just tasting like old bitter bark. And then we have the transport of it to your palate as well. So that's being dulled. So you get flat, dull, woody, meh. And everyone's tasted this. Everyone's had a bag that's been in the cupboard for a long time, and you've got rid of all your nice fresh coffee that you bought, and there's that old bag that somebody got you for Christmas, and you have that, and you know exactly what it's going to taste like, and it's going to taste like it could be anything. It's all going to taste exactly the same. So how do we stop these things happening? How do we help ourselves have fresher coffee at home? So there are 5 kind of things that we want to avoid. So the first one is light. So light ages things. So UV ages things. This is why you have hoppers with a slight UV tinge on the top of there, so that doesn't do that. It doesn't get through those. I had a woman in a session a couple of years ago, and she said, "Do you mean like women in the south of France?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, they're all really stunning and beautiful until they hit 30, and then they're shriveled prunes." I was like, yes, yeah, okay, but yeah, I've used it in every session since anyway, but it's good. So light will age things. Heat. So if we have an abundance of heat, any reactions that are happening, so the oxidation or any other stuff that's happening inside the bean, that's going to happen faster in a hotter environment. So if you're in a really hot place, say you're storing your coffee bag right on top of your espresso machine, that's going to be a really hot place. That's going to speed up any reactions that are happening at that point. Air. So we want to try and avoid air if we possibly can, because we want to limit the amount of oxygen that can come in contact with the coffee to stop the oxidation. So limit that, sorry about that. So limit that as much as we possibly can. Moisture. So moisture will take flavour out of coffee really, really well. This is why we use it to brew coffee, because we can dissolve stuff in water really easily, and that's one of the things about water that's good and possibly bad. But we can take flavour out of coffee with water. So any undue or any overexposure to any moisture pre your brewing, you're going to be losing some of that flavour. So you could have had it on your palate, but you haven't because you've lost it. And then strong odours. So strong odours is another thing we want to avoid, because coffee will try and equalise with whatever environment it's in. So if you have it sitting next to some kind of fruit or some charcoal or whatever, or some domestos under the sink, it's going to start to smell and taste of that, and it's going to be the last thing in that's going to be the first thing out, and it's going to dominate the flavour. So if you keep it next to spices, it's going to taste like that. So they're the 5 things. So light, heat, air, moisture, strong odours. Okay?